back to your seats of any Theology on Tap ever after the break. Well done. Give yourselves a round of applause. Truly, truly. Yes. Wow. Rousing. Okay. Here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to introduce, they're going to introduce themselves. Some of you have already been texting in questions, and that's great. Keep it up. I'm going to be lobbing those questions to the panelists, the ones I think seem to represent the crowd. But here's the deal, we're talking about myths around Christmas, and sometimes the things that we're talking about, half the people will think are a myth and the other half don't, or vice versa. And we might be surprised some of the things we all agree on, or all disagree on. So what I'm going to do is ask each of the panelists to give us just a little 20-second blurb, who you are, kind of how you arrived here, and I have made them sit on sides, y'all. So middle is right here. These guys are the Christians. These guys are the not yet Christians. I'm teasing. They're not Christians. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you landed here, and then I will throw you your first question. Let's start with our guests. You want to start us off?
Hi, I'm Brian. About a year ago, I raised my hand here to ask a question, and now I'm up on stage. I am not necessarily a believer, but I used to be.
Hi, I'm Kurt. Sarah found me on Facebook through my friend Emmanuel, and I describe myself as an atheist, pantheist, naturalist, depending on who I'm talking to, so yeah.
It's a lot of ists.
Hi, I'm Daniel, and I am I guess you'd call me an atheist, but I don't really use that word. I'm a spiritual naturalist and a humanist, and so that's me. And how I got here.
Yeah.
I was recommended to Sarah by
Gregory.
a mutual acquaintance.
Y'all need to eat the mic really right up close because we're recording.
Really right up close.
Yes.
Just like that. Yep. My name is Paul Sloan. I teach at Houston Baptist University. I teach New Testament there. And I've been on the panel for a couple years now, ish. And that's about it.
Well, my name's Taylor, and like these guys, I was strong-armed by Sarah into being here. I am a Christian. I wasn't always a believer. Through the study of apologetics, though, I did come to believe that Christianity was more probably true than not. And so I decided to live as a Christian, and then that changed my life. And so I've just stayed with now I'm at Theology on Tap.
I'm Meredith Mills. I'm pastor at Westminster. So as Sarah pointed out, Christian, yes. I also lead Gastro Church, and I've been on leadership for 3 years now, I think.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, good job. Yay. Winning already. First question I'm going to ask you guys to banter around a little bit is there really a war on Christmas? Is there a war on Christmas?
I mean, I'm going to have to open it up with, no, there really isn't. Just that simple.
I'll say something snarky and kind of say, yeah, but it's not really the atheists, it's more the Christians, right?
Say more.
I guess maybe I should pose this to y'all, more to y'all. What part of the Christmas celebration is actually pulled from Scripture, or so?
I mean, the telling fact to me was the fact that the war on Christmas was supposedly being fought in Walmart, which is like not where Christians are supposed to be celebrating Christmas in the first place. And so, no, I think a few people blew a lot of things way out of proportion and felt very victim-y. But no, I don't overall see a war on Christmas going on.
So I agree with what's been said. So maybe this will be a little bit of a boring question, maybe, but I would give a little bit of credence to those who say that there is a war on Christmas, just because I do think that there is a general sense that Christmas isn't inclusive enough, right? And so there's this feeling that there are some that want to kind of secularize this holiday, and you're quite right. I mean, a lot of times that's been the Christians, right, making it about consumerism and everything else. But that does seem like a bit of an attack on the purpose of Christmas.
I'm going to move us on because it seems like it's not getting super juicy. So here's another one. Maybe this will get juicier. It comes in several parts. Would Jesus want you to celebrate Christmas? And contrastly, should atheists celebrate Christmas? Are they allowed? I'm kidding. Let me ask it again. Would Jesus want you to celebrate Christmas? I think the implication is Christmas as we have it now. And then contrastly, should atheists even celebrate Christmas? Discuss.
I mean, so my answer to that is the way I come to think about Christmas as it exists in our culture today is that we really kind of have two different things going on. Like, we have our countrywide, nationwide Santa Claus and Rudolph and fake snow because we don't have real snow, and everyone wears things that look like sweaters but aren't warm because it's Texas. And also, you're supposed to give more money that time of the year. You're supposed to be nice to your family, even when you're not nice to your family. You're supposed to, like, it's the one day of year. It's like, oh, it's Christmas. You can't be nice, be mean to this guy. And, like, that's all part of this, the secular celebration that we call Christmas. And there's a lot of really good things about that, but I think it's completely separate from what we talk about the Feast of Christmas, which Advent is the season of preparation leading up to talking about realizing the implications of God with us and this extraordinary miracle of the incarnation, and what that means then for us in how we live generously, and how we treat our families, and in how we inhabit the miracle of everyday life and the sacredness that has become because of the incarnation. And I feel like those two happen at the same time. And so for Christians, it's almost like we're navigating the waters between enjoying what's going on in Rudolph and Frosty land, and not ignoring what we're being invited to experience through especially Matthew and Luke.
I think for a lot of us, there's a sort of a middle point between those two, or maybe some other third point. But I kind of feel like, also the war on Christmas for me is about a general kind of desacralizing a lot of things. And I think it makes a lot of sense to have, even though, we don't have those particular beliefs, I think it makes a lot of sense to have a time of year where you focus on things like generosity and compassion and coming together with loved ones and helping the needy and that sort of thing. And why not have that at the coldest, darkest time of the year? That makes a lot of sense to a lot of non-Christians as well. So that's something it's not exactly the theological basis that Christians celebrate, but there's a lot of overlapping values there, and it's also not consumist, either. So
I'll say something. So you'll have to tell me if I'm correct on this, and maybe you too, or all of y'all. So when I was a Christian, there was the idea that you're supposed to be set apart from the world. And it seems like the more secular it gets, right, the more worldly it gets. And so you would want to be set apart from the world. And so in the celebration, would Jesus want us to celebrate Christmas, right, is the question. And it seems like in the way we celebrate Christmas, absolutely not. Would y'all?
Yeah, but it depends on what
Microphone.
I think it depends on what element you're talking about. I don't think Jesus hates family, right? I don't think Jesus is like, don't have dinner with your family on Christmas Eve. Like, I mean, if it don't go into debt buying useless stuff that's going to end up in a third world country when your people give it away, then yeah. But I think there's a whole lot of different elements, and it's a whole mixed bag of good and bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And but at the same time, it focuses on one time of the year, right? And so that's kind of detracts from the idea.
But there's always been feast days.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I don't think there's any...
that's what I'm saying is you're supposed to be separate from that, right?
But what's wrong with feast days? Like, what's wrong with separating a certain time of the year? Like, we're gonna have to celebrate this. Like, I don't think Jesus would have a problem with.
I guess not. That's what I'm deferring to y'all,
Yeah.
like the experts, theologians.
Well, I think even in the practice of going to church every Sunday, I go to church, every now and then. Mennonites, they're really cool churches, by the way, if anybody ever wants to go. And
Did you say you go to church every Sunday?
No, every so often.
Oh, okay. This is one of our atheists, just to clarify, if that's confusing for anyone. Okay. Oh, yeah.
But I've noticed that a lot of the themes are often repeated. There's not anything like really brand new in most sermons, and that's not because people are coming over there and they've totally forgotten all of them. They just need a reminder every now and then, like every single week, like sometimes every single day, because we all forget stuff. And I think, Christmas focusing on goodwill and giving and love and, kind of focusing on the beautiful aspects of Jesus and the resurrection. Ultimately, it's just saying, hey, everybody, let's all think of this all at the same time together, and we'll make it a national holiday, so why not? At least from a secular perspective.
Paul?
Sure. Excuse me. The idea of being set apart or separate is certainly a category in both Old and New Testament of like the believing community being set apart by God for certain purposes, sanctified by God's own presence in their midst, that sort of thing. So in terms of what the actual holiday is commemorating, Christmas is our label for it. What the holiday is commemorating and what we're being thankful for on that day is obviously God becoming a human and dwelling in our midst. And so that's obviously is a uniquely Christian confession, right? That's not a non-Christian confession that the creator of the universe became a human and dwelt among us. So Christmas as a holiday is celebrating and being thankful for that. So once you take it that way, no, I don't. To go back to your original question, Brian, I don't think that Jesus would be upset, so to say, at someone being thankful or commemorating that sort of thing. And the set apartness, again, Jesus kept his own feasts and festivals, right? So he went down to Jerusalem for all the annual things. So in terms of the like Passover and Day of Atonement and all this 3 to
the ones.
3 to 7 annual things. So I don't think holy days in and of themselves are something that are supposed to be not participated in by either Jews or Christians, right?
That's awesome. I'm going to move us on. Y'all are really coming up with some good questions. I like these. This one says, WTF, I don't know what that means, do you? WTF is up with all these Christmas gifts. How did that become part of Christ mess? They put Christ in caps. I'm going to ask it again. WTF is up with all these Christmas gifts. How did that become part of Christmas?
I'm sorry, I thought I was talking to it. Okay, so historically there is a precedent for, so the whole tradition of St. Nicholas as a gift giver had to do with generosity to the poor, right? And there is a precedent of a time of considering what you have and what you can share, and what you should share with the poor. Specifically, like all of the traditions we have originated in a story somewhere having to do with St. Nicholas, typically, or some saint or someone somewhere, typically helping someone financially in a way that would save their lives. And so that's where it originated. And in our culture, what it has become, I think people took that kind of original idea. The Feast of Christmas, you originally gave alms to the poor, right? Like this is where it came from. And because of where we went after World War II, where we kind of economically hit this standard of living, never before experienced in the history of the world, and our economy began to rely only on consumerism, and businesses make a third of their budget or more in December. Like all of those things kind of went together to where now people spend billions of dollars to make us want things we don't want and feel guilty if we don't buy these things. And I think Christians and the rest of our entire culture has gotten wrapped up in, if you do not spend a quarter of your income at Christmas, you're a bad person, which I think everyone up here recognizes is a bad thing. In fact, I think most Americans recognize it's a bad thing. The trouble is we've built our entire economics on it right now, and stopping it is just hard to do just cold. That's my phrase.
There's also, how do we get out of any of these big scale things that are going on in society that we're trying to reverse? It feels insurmountable. Whether you're talking about the environment or anything else, when you actually get down on a ground level and you try to change. Like, for example, I come from a Christian family, and most of my extended family are Christians. And a few years ago, my wife and I tried to address this kind of thing and say, hey, what if we do this and do that? We tried some different versions of it on different years. But we always just ended up being the Grinch. No matter what we tried. What if, we want you this year to make our gifts be a donation to something. And then they felt weird about it because they're giving each other gifts and ours is something else, and it just, we haven't figured out a way to
How am I supposed to know
get out
how
of
much
that.
you care about me if I can't monetize that in a gift? It's very confusing.
Are you going to say something? Or? Okay, just holding it. You're doing a great job, though. Bang up job. Yeah. Okay. This one is a hard question, and I'm glad that somebody put this one in there. It says, if God exists, then why are so many people suffering this holiday season? So it's a big question, but especially around the holiday season. If God exists, then why are so many people suffering this holiday season?
It's a little.
I could, but I feel like answered every single one.
Yeah, I feel like it's a little hard to answer that from the if God exists when I don't think. Yeah.
This question is clearly for this side of the panel, but feel free to weigh in should you want to.
Hypothetically speaking.
Although I could even technically in my own idea of God. Hello, bro. So there we go. My idea of God is that with the pantheist side of my belief, I do think that there's an element of when people say God or whatever, they're talking about something that is a larger power than themselves that they don't necessarily understand, which I think many people would kind of describe God in that in some sort of way, and some Eastern religions do as well. And so for me, whenever I guess I hear Christian logic or Christianese or just stuff from the Bible, I think, does God forgive me, or does the universe generally not really care about my whatever I'm doing, and therefore I can be kind of de facto forgiven for that reason. So why do people suffer? Because the universe doesn't generally care about whether or not you're going to be hurt or you're going to feel really good, because things just happen. And hard truth, yeah.
Yeah, so this is a really, really big question, and probably the most common one that I hear asked to me from a Christian perspective. And I think that there's two parts to it. There's the logical problem of evil, and then the emotional problem of evil. And the logical problem always goes something like, well, if God was all powerful, then he could stop all instances of evil. And if he was all good, then he would stop all instances of evil. And yet evil exists, and therefore God is either not all powerful or he's not all good. And if that's the case, then why call him God? The problem is that the second premise in this argument is actually not true. The fact that we might not know why God would allow each specific instance of evil does not mean that there's a logical contradiction between the existence of evil and the existence of God. This is easy for me to understand as a parent, right? Like, my child has a limited perspective. So when I take them for their first shots, it seems cruel and purposeless to them, right? But I know as the parent that this is for their good. Now, that's not a satisfying answer, obviously, to most instances of really grievous suffering, but it does kind of demonstrate that there's not a logical contradiction between the existence of evil and the existence of God. And then kind of what I like to do with this question is pivot a little bit, because we all seem to have this shared perspective that there is such a thing as evil, right? That it's bad when people suffer, and when there's no explanation that we can see for suffering, it seems pointless. That's a bad thing. But that objection really only makes sense from a theistic perspective, right? Because if God does not exist, and we've had this conversation, I don't know if we want to go down this rabbit hole.
By the way, these two will be on the podcast soon, so if you enjoy hearing them spar, stick around. Continue.
But at least to me, it certainly seems reasonable and actually quite obvious that if God doesn't exist, then our notions of good and evil really just boil down to human opinion, right? And hard as it might be, you will find some people that will look at almost any instance of evil and decide that there's some rational justification for it. And so if it boils down to human opinion, then it doesn't really exist in an ontological way, in a real way.
What does ontological mean?
Let's just... Yeah.
I'm helping the people in the audience that don't know that word.
So ontology is basically the study of what is, the ultimate reality, what is real. And so if there's no standard beyond human beings to which we can appeal to justify what we say is right and wrong, then right and wrong is an illusion. Now the bigger part is the emotional problem of evil, I think, and that probably needs a pastoral response.
But hold up, because he's jonesing.
Okay, so
By the way, you'll need to hold the mic perpendicular.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
We all absolutely sympathize. So part of the human condition is for when we do see suffering, we want to ascribe a reason to it. Because surely this isn't happening for no reason. And this is a devastating thing. It's a hard fact of life. Not just suffering, but that people, living things suffer for something that we would not call a good reason. And this is a sad fact of life. Now, is there a reason for it, is what you're getting at. Which I would
Why
say,
is it sad?
well, we deem it to be, right? At the same time, at the opinions of others, we can suffer at the opinions of others. And to that person, it may not be sad. They may find, in the worst cases, what I call worst, they'll find joy out of this. And this is devastating, and we want to try and get out of this. And we're, in this room at least, I think, we're all in agreement about most of those things. So it's hard to say that there is a reason for everything, because there are some atrocities, right? And this gets back to the problem of evil, and it does appeal to emotion, but I think there is a reason it appeals to emotion, in that there are some atrocities where it shouldn't just be a moral law. I think if I were creating a universe, I would make it a physical law, right? And so it goes into that line of reasoning.
Wait, real quick. Somebody asked if Paul would address this question, just to put you on the spot.
Not yet.
Okay.
And going off of the why is it sad thing, I would, quick question, do cows have morality?
Cows?
Do cows have morality? Like from your theological perspective?
I don't know.
Okay, I don't know. Because
Always a wise answer.
sadness is like literally like evolutionary, a thing that is stuck in our lizard brain, and got something for that. Because if a cow loses its best friend, and cows do have best friends, they really do. Sad thing. Whenever they lose them, they can go into depressive fits. Same thing with dogs. Many of us have seen dogs, lose owners and fellow animal friends and whatnot, and those are just visceral emotional reactions. And whenever you get into the human aspect of it, of why does something feel sad? Whenever we make connections with people, we make connections with, even if somebody's not necessarily close to us, we often recognize the humanity in strangers and in, beings around us. Or we recognize at least that the consequences of whatever kind of actions are going to cause literal pain and just physical suffering, which is oftentimes like a literal pain signal in your brain, very physically centered. So those things are not just evolutionarily centered. They're literally physically there. There's no non-tangential, whatever physical word is, I'm sure, non-material things to it. Yeah.
I'm going to ask one more person, and because we cannot solve the entire problem of evil tonight, we're going to move on. But Paul, did you have anything you wanted to add? Since people are texting, make Paul talk.
Sure, yeah, no, I'm curious. Thanks.
It doesn't have to be about this, just anything. Like if you have a recipe you want to share, or
A couple of things. I'm curious about the thing you said about what's the point? What was the point you were making about physical? The fact that it has a physical manifestation. What point does that illustrate?
Basically, there is for me, in my personal view, a naturalistic explanation of things like sadness, things like, I guess, the reactions to why we feel things like sad or happy, or this is good or bad.
Okay, yeah. That it has a physical manifestation wouldn't necessarily describe its origin or explanation. That's just a description of how it's manifesting, right? So, there's all sorts of causes for something, right? Like a chair is a chair because it's formed a certain way, but it also has a material cause, namely wood, and it also has a purpose cause, i.e. like the fact that it's designed to be a certain thing that you sit in, right? And so there's, in the 5th century BC, a famous philosopher came up with 5 different causes of things, and then they were 4, and then it got expanded to 5 by Thomas. And so my point is that has a physical manifestation. It actually doesn't explain anything. It's just simply a description of the thing that is happening. But that's actually not even my point. I think that the bigger point about the problem of evil, and particularly the point about Christmas, is why is it happening during this time? And an important thing to remember about the whole Christian narrative is that it's precisely the problem of evil that angers God so much himself. Point being there that evil itself is a unexplained kind of chaotic bad thing that makes God as angry as it does us, and his whole point is to assume the very problem that plagues us and thereby solve it himself by kind of killing it and then leaving it dead. And so I suppose that again, as Taylor, yeah, as Taylor was saying earlier, not to like flip it back on you guys, but the idea that like this is precisely the problem that is being addressed in Christmas. The idea that like suffering plagues everybody, and it's the sort of thing that Jesus assumes onto himself and then sort of drowns. So I could go on, I suppose, but also we've not talked about Satan. But anyway.
But if you were here in October, we definitely talked about Satan, so he got a lot of airtime. Let me say this really quick before we go on to the next question. If you or somebody that you know is struggling this time of year, because so many people are, hit up one of us. We would love to take you out to coffee, talk it out, and just be a friend. So anybody on the panel, I think, would be up for that. And then raise your hand if you're on the leadership team for Theology Untitled. We got Michael Jarbo back there. We got Evan back there, Haley, Ashley, and then this lady and this guy and me. So I'm being serious. We would love to take you out to coffee, wine, beer, whatever, and discuss. So moving on, we're getting now into the land of miracles. Here we go. We can't talk about Christmas without talking about the little virgin birth. So question is, I didn't realize that would be so funny. I'll be here all night, folks. Try the veal. Okay, what's up with the virgin birth? Do people really believe that? If it's so important, why is it only in 2 of the Gospels? You may have to explain what the Gospels are. So one more time, it goes like this. What's up with the virgin birth? Do people really believe that? If it's so important, why is it only in 2 of the Gospels? Want to start?
Why is it only in 2 of the Gospels? That's not.
That's not a Brian question, no.
Matthew and Luke.
It's related. Y'all want to hear it? All right. Okay. So this is something I've been pondering on because we've talked about having this event for a few weeks. So my question to y'all is in the virgin birth, right? So the idea of the virgin birth, the reason it's significant, not only because of, I don't know if y'all believe in immaculate conception or not, but so not just
Immaculate conception is different from the virgin birth.
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure people in the audience know that.
Keeping Mary innocent, basically. So the idea is prophecy. And so part of it is the prophecy of the virgin birth. But we have nothing to indicate that anyone saw it coming. And if the point of prophecy is to say, hey, that's God, it could also be just that it is to reveal the will of God. So in hindsight, maybe it works. But it seems, I don't know, this is kind of one of those snarky kind of questions. So
It's okay, let's hear it.
Yeah, go ahead. Go on.
Well, I should really let either the New Testament scholar or the pastor probably speak about this one.
Perpendicular. That's like gangsta. Yeah.
I do just want to point out a couple of things that come to my mind around this question. And really, the first one is, for me, it kind of boils down to, are miracles possible? Right? Because it seems obvious to me that if God exists, then miracles are possible. And so the virgin birth doesn't really pose a problem for me in that way. And then my rational warrant for believing in this miracle in particular would be really the central event of human history, which was Christ's death and resurrection. I believe there's good evidence to believe that. And if that actually happened, then I think I have justification for believing what Christ says. And this is what Christ believed about himself.
And just to add about the because you mentioned about the point about prophecy being like the Isaiah prophecy. Isaiah prophesies in chapter 7, right? 6, 7, right? Okay. Yeah,
It's in Isaiah.
Yeah, that a woman will be with child and he'll be named. A Parthenos will conceive and she'll bear a child and he'll be called Emmanuel. Sorry, thanks. Thank you. 7:14. Isaiah 7:14. The Greek word is Parthenos, and it's typically translated maiden or virgin, so it can go either way. The idea being that no one foresaw it, right, as a potential critique, or if the reason I think that doesn't quite work in the New Testament is that no one saw the cross coming. It seems. I mean, it seems to be the sort of thing that precisely shattered everyone's expectations, and often a prophet understanding his own prophecies was never really a necessary condition for the prophecy to be the case. Case in point being Caiaphas, in I think John 10 or 11, when he says, look. Everyone was worried that Jesus was going to lead Israel astray, and Caiaphas says, "Oh, well, then let's just kill Jesus, right? Because if Jesus leads us astray, then Rome is going to come and destroy our nation and take away our temple and everything." And then the narrator pipes up and says, he didn't know that he was prophesying, right? Being the high priest that year, he had prophesied. In other words, the New Testament itself doesn't hold as a necessary condition that prophets understand their own prophecies. It seems that by virtue of the speaking through an inspiration of the Holy Spirit, they're able to speak something that they themselves don't understand, but then comes to a fruition that has a different meaning than even they understood themselves, right? So at least from granted that you might not accept the New Testament's perspective, but the New Testament's perspective on miracles themselves and prophecies themselves is that it doesn't require that the prophet understand what they're saying. It's just that they speak what God has given them, right? And then it comes to fruition, often in ways that they didn't expect, right? Cross being a chief one of those, but.
Can I say word?
Meredith and Daniel, how about that?
Yeah, no, so part of what we need to acknowledge is that two things about the virgin birth. First of all, it was in its original incarnation, this theology, it's a lot more than just a virgin birth. It has to do with a very, very technical understanding of the nature of original sin and how it is passed down. And so it had to do with Mary didn't have original sin, and therefore Jesus didn't have original sin, and it gets very complicated. And also there are Christians now who don't necessarily accept the translations and don't think that actually meant virgin birth. And so I think it gets a little bit trickier than just saying I believe versus I don't believe. I tend to lean toward most Christians have believed in a virgin birth, and so if I'm accepting Jesus rose from the dead, this is a lot less of a leap to make. And so I haven't had that much of an issue with it, but I do think that it's in its original incarnation, this was a whole lot more than just a girl getting pregnant without a guy involved.
I guess along those lines, or at least for me, this question is kind of not really relevant because you'd have to first believe that there was a God and that there was divine aspects to the whole thing. What I try to do is, this is going to open up a whole can of worms, but
We like worms here.
I use a lot of ancient philosophy to kind of guide my personal practice. Stoicism is one of them, and there's an ancient Pyrrhonism or Pyrrhonism that's kind of a skeptic philosophy, but what I try to do is use skeptical principles not to bash other people's beliefs, but as a personal practice. And one of those was called the Art of Withholding Assent, which is basically being humble in your claims of knowledge. And so when you can't know something, even in principle, then it's pretty much agnosticism. It's like saying, well, I don't really know about that. I know that I don't like suffering, and I don't like seeing other people suffer, and I know that we live in a better world when we treat each other kindly, and so those are the kinds of things that I focus on. And so theology to me is, or at least these kinds of aspects of theology to me, is it requires a lot of foundational beliefs that build on one another, and so that's why it puts me in a completely different place.
think I can bring this all back around to the original.
I'd appreciate that, yeah.
So the original question had to do with the narrative being in both.
Well, it was, what do we think about the virgin birth? And then if it's real, why was it only in 2 Gospels?
So I guess I would pose another question to y'all. So in the stories, right, when we see scripture, right, it's wholly inspired by God. We would expect it to be very similar, right? But we get somewhat different narratives in both Matthew and Luke, and you get different reasons for things and a little bit different narratives and a little bit of, I don't recall, you'd have to tell me if there's a different order to things. I know I can't remember if it was the Magi that knew from the dream to go see Jesus. But granted, at the same time, let me just say kind of what you said. If you grant miracles, pretty much anything is fair game.
I mean, the Gospels are...
Can y'all tell, what is a gospel? For those in the audience that don't know.
There are 4 books of the New Testament that were written to tell the story of Jesus: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and those are considered the 4 Gospels. They're theological books written for a particular purpose through a particular audience. So even in a room, if you have 4 people telling a story, they're going to tell it a different way. They're going to say different things. They're going to get details wrong. That is the nature of human memory. When you take a few years down the road and you have 4 people composing text to an audience in order to communicate a theological message, even if they are even if they're telling a true story, they're going to tell the true story in 4 different ways. And that's
Does that mean that inerrancy is not a part of your theology?
It depends on how you define
Oh,
it.
let's not get into that. Only because we have so many holiday questions. Sorry. Oh, not that warm. Did anybody else want to say anything about? Okay.
Only that I mean, yeah, there are different orderings of things, but I'm happy to be corrected here. I don't recall any so-called contradictions in the narratives about the birth. I mean, an angel tells. No, you didn't say. Well, I thought you said it's just. No, you didn't say contradictions. Then I guess. Yeah. So then I guess then. What's your question then, right? Like, because the differences are fine, right?
Microphone.
You would think there would be a very close similarity, and it does. Why? Oh, well, if you grant inerrancy, right? If you grant this is God, so there's different views. Like if you want to just say like people tried to write down events that happened, right? So if I don't, are you? So yeah. So the questions that come up when I looked into this a while back, was so it doesn't meet certain like historical criteria, right? Because it's not, you don't get an independent or certain attestations, right? And so for example, we think they appeal to a common source, Q, I believe, and I have no idea. Like you would know.
I'm going to move us off from this just because we have other holiday questions.
Sorry.
But here's the deal. This is the kind of thing we can talk about in the podcast. What? Okay. And I'm curious from the panel, be honest. Who before this read any of the birth narratives from the Bible in preparation for this? One atheist in the last month. So Brian said something about, I'm going to read the Gospels before this. I'm like, yeah, you go read those Gospels. That's awesome. Okay. Well, there's only 2 to read. Yeah. Okay. We've had several questions come in about how much of Christmas is Christian and how much is pagan. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. One person wrote, if we stripped away the commercialized and syncretized pagan elements from Christmas celebrations, what would be left? Other people said things like, how much of Christmas is even Christian anymore? How much have we appropriated? So discuss.
Okay, I want to say this though, because I feel like Christians can become like the Grinch here and be like, go give all of your money to the poor and then sit alone in silence and pray on Christmas. And that is the only way to observe Christmas. And I feel like it is possible to baptize things that were not Christian and to say that this is we're going to do this in a spirit of Christianity. And like, so trees, there was no tree in the manger, right? There was no, like, Christmas trees were not a part of the first Christmas. I don't think it's a bad thing to have a Christmas tree, because I think what we can say is, I'm doing this because it's fun and it's beautiful and it's in the spirit of honoring this story. Like, I feel that we can do things in the right spirit to a certain point. I don't think it's possible to baptize spending a quarter of our income at Walmart. I don't think that level. But I think a lot of the things that did not originate with Christianity can be used in a Christian spirit, because if we went back to the original guys, we'd be singing Gregorian chants, standing around a font, literally in a language that none of us understand.
Paul's about it, though.
Paul's like, that's how I worship every day, Meredith.
Oh my gosh.
And so I feel like Christians go way too hard, or try to go way too hard with this, and we don't have to.
Maybe some of you can list off some of the things that aren't pagan that we've appropriated. I mean, she just says them are or aren't. Like, the virgin birth is ours from the beginning, yay.
I actually feel like it's...
Is the date?
I actually feel like it's kind of an unfair criticism that non-Christians hurl at Christians a lot, because there's all kinds of influences. Everything we have came from influences, and you can trace influences in the Bible that came from other places. A lot of the wisdom streams that come into the Bible come from earlier thought. And I don't see anything wrong with saying, well, the rest of the culture is all off from work right now, so we might as well have our Christmas at this time, and we might as well, do these kinds of things as long as it's not violating core values. So the fact that a Christmas tree was related to what was then predominant beliefs, I don't see that as any kind of criticism of Christianity or anything like that myself.
Yeah, I mean, just to agree with you, I mean, the holiday grows out of a culture, right? It has a cultural context, and especially if you're evangelical, then it would make sense to use familiar symbols in that culture. But I think the key thing for Christians is kind of like you were saying, Meredith, is this something that is honoring to God, and is this something that we can baptize and accept into our practice?
So, we had candles from the beginning.
Good. Another check mark for us.
I think I'm kind of curious from, I guess, the more Christian perspective, because I guess for me personally, I don't actively think of, I don't think of Jesus whenever I think of Christmas for my personal life, or at least I don't engage in that. But is there a way to kind of meld the secular gift giving into a genuine, I guess, Christian, Christ-focused version of Christmas that is even like kind of the Walmart version of Christmas? My first thought was, like, they do sell socks at Walmart. They do sell, blankets. They sell even things that, are entertaining, like a Nintendo Switch. If anybody wants to get me a Nintendo Switch, I won't convert for you, but I'll say a prayer for you. I will at least do that. But I do think, as long as it's given in a genuine, like, I want to give love to this person, genuinely give something that someone was not necessarily expecting, but something that they, would just have a better life for, it's not necessarily bad.
No, I absolutely agree. I just think everyone agrees we take it to excess, right? I think we can get back. This is the American predicament. It's not a question of what; it's a question of how much, right? We all know our houses are too big. We all know we spend too much. We all know we eat too much. We all know everything. And the question is, where's the fine line? And I have a 2-year-old, and I loved buying her toys this year because I am to the point where I get a whole lot of joy out of seeing her enjoy things. And I'm just preparing myself that we're getting one toy. We're not getting like 12 toys. And we live in a culture that says you've got to get 50 toys or you're not happy.
I'm going to go ahead and cut this off just because we're getting close to the end, and it sounds like no one's really having a hard time with the pagan thing. So, all right, we appropriated some stuff. Everyone's cool with it. All right, let's move on. We're going to cover Santa, and then we're going to do our final question, and then I'm just going to warn you guys, I think we're going to sing together at the end. But don't worry, I'm not going to make you sing a Jesus-y song. Yes, hold your beer and get crazy kind of song. Yes. By the way, fun fact, My daughter said one time in the middle of a church service where we're singing "We Three Kings," this song sounds like pirates. Oh, star wonders. Anyway, I thought that was funny. Okay, let's talk about Santa a little bit. Is he evil? Is he okay? Does teaching our children to believe in falsehoods like Santa undermine belief in God or spiritual truths? You've got 5 minutes on this, and then we're going to our final question.
Because I have probably a controversial view on this, at least within my family, if I ever do have kids, don't think I'm going to at least talk to them about Santa and hear about it. I do not think I will tell them, oh, Santa's real. I think I would say, no, it's a story some people tell people. Because I don't think of it from a spiritual perspective or even any of those. I think, why should I purposely lie to my kid and break their trust in this way at such an early age?
Yeah, because there's a big spectrum of practice on the Christian side as well. I mean, like within the Christian camp, there's a Christian camp in America. Then there's a pretty big spectrum there on even that. I mean, my family was Christian and they didn't do Santa stuff precisely for that reason. So precisely because of that, they were like, "Look, we just don't want to."
Did you have a sad childhood because of that?
No.
Yes.
My parents are passed away now, but throughout their whole life, I never acknowledged that I knew what was up because I didn't want to stop the gravy train. All the way I was having facial hair. It was like, yeah, Santa, okay, sounds cool.
And then there's the whole spectrum of opinion on this that are like, yeah, sure, it's fine because it's all part of like the Christian sort of mythos of celebrating this thing of celebrating a good gift giver who loves kids, and so we're gonna, use that for like our own good here, i.e., use an economic metaphor, magnifying a good gift giver. That's a good Christian virtue and charity. So let's magnify that. So I mean, there's all sorts of good uses of that, i.e., not being deceitful and using it in the sense of like let's highlight gift giving, right? So there's all sorts of appropriate uses of it, and I don't see a black line in the sand or something as to the right or wrong way on it.
Okay, y'all, my family was so nerdy. We talked about Bishop Nicholas growing up. I'm not even kidding. Because my dad was a pastor, and he's like, this saint was born in blah, blah, blah. And then he told us the legends of St. Nicholas and how he was a gift giver, and that's why we talked. So, I mean, it was a saint of the church. Like, it is absolutely possible to do it in an appropriate way. But yeah, not all. I really doubt there are many houses out there who are like, you're being visited by Bishop Nicholas. This. Yeah, it was just us.
Brian?
So I'll try and make, again, be the contrarian. Yeah. All right. So there, I can't remember. I don't remember if it was Paul Bloom or who, but there are psychology studies, regarded as a soft science or not, that do indicate that if you do believe certain things as a childhood, you have a harder time as you grow up distinguishing reality from fiction. I wish I had the citation, but I would agree with you that I probably wouldn't stop it. I'm not going to be like, Timmy, you need to stop. But
Still call him Timmy to begin with.
yeah, I just wouldn't. I probably wouldn't reinforce it, maybe, but I wouldn't, like, if the kid believes Santa brought him packages, great. I don't.
See, and I wonder if that's a personality type or actually the parents' teaching, right? Like, I hear a study like that and be like, yeah, it sounds like there's a personality type that has a hard time.
I
don't know.
I wish I could cite the study, because it had, when I read through it, it had pretty good controls, but it's been a while.
Okay, we're going to do Daniel, then Paul, then next question.
But in another sense, I do believe in Santa, and I think that
Praised be.
there is a way to. It's almost like Jungian archetypes.
What's happening?
Sorry, it might be my. I had it on my.
Hello.
Okay.
It was Paul's fault. We're good.
There's these figures in our culture that represent values, and so Einstein is the genius. There's the person who was Einstein, who's got all kinds of messy stuff with his life and all that. But then there's the archetype, and so that figure can be and that's why for me, I left Christianity and I went into I was an atheist for a few minutes, then I became a humanist, and then now as a spiritual naturalist, I'm starting to appreciate a sense of the sacred about things, and I'm a practicing Buddhist, and then that made me appreciate Jesus now. But now for me, it's more like the figure of Jesus. It doesn't really matter to me the supernatural aspects, the theological aspects, but in terms of moral teachings and things like that, I have on my altar a rosary that we got at the Vatican, and but I also have a bust of Socrates, and I have a Buddha, and I have a lot of different things that inspire me and keep me focused. Anyway.
Just use his mic.
It's best.
Okay, then moving on. Last question. Okay, you don't have to tell me twice to pop up here. Okay, this person asks, could the three atheists share the most convincing thing they've heard for belief in Christ/Christmas, and the three Christians share what they see as the most challenging stumbling block for belief? That's a fantastic question, whoever turned this in. So I'll read it one more time.
You should stand up. That's such a good question.
That is a good question. With a real Slim Shady? No? Okay. Could the three atheists share the most convincing... Oh, it was Kit? No, it was not. I have you in my phone, nerd. Huh? Who was it? Yes! Nice job! Okay. You know what? Just for that, you can come back to the next Theology on Tap.
They're gonna ask you to
Only her. It's just one person taking questions. Okay. Could the three atheists share the most convincing thing they've heard for belief in Christ or Christmas, even if it didn't work all the way, right? But the most convincing. And the three Christians share what they see as the most challenging stumbling block for belief. And we have 4 minutes, y'all, so everyone gets like 40 seconds. That's my math. Okay. You're gonna have to pass it around. Yeah.
Okay, my most challenging thing is also one of my most encouraging things, just depending on the day of the week. It's my most challenging thing about Christianity is Christians.
Oh snap! Preach.
It's churches. It's the fact that it's hard to see a church that looks like a church. It's hard to find a Christian that looks like a Christian. And if the message is true, then the presence of Christ within us is supposed to make us all look like Jesus. And we are supposed to look more like Jesus at the end of our lives than we do at the beginning. And the number of Christians for whom that is not true is staggering.
For me, it is the emotional problem of evil. But then the left side of my brain kicks in, and I just, I keep coming back to this idea that there is no rational justification for my moral outrage without some standard beyond myself to appeal to.
We're passing the one mic down to whoever's.
Yeah, no, go on.
They're all so nice. Who's going next?
I actually would say that I don't think this is a little bit of a side, not a swipe, whatever. It's a little bit of a diversion from this answer, but I'd say my best reason for, say, giving Christianity a shot, if anything else, or at least trying to listen to the stories and believe that there is some truth to it, no matter how much there is actually the opposite of yours. Many of the great Christians that I've personally met, I've met people that have been legitimately changed once they, not necessarily started being a Christian, but once they started feeling, I guess for lack of a better word, the Holy Spirit, aka community within a bunch of people that are actively trying to do something good, and trying to just be better and actively applying their faith to it. I've seen too many good people to think, clearly this is just a bunch of insanity that means nothing. There's clearly something to it.
I think for me, one of the most powerful things was that in the midst of something like the Roman Empire, there was this figure or this rising up of a movement that said, not love your neighbor, but love your enemies. And that was something that was pretty out there. So it feels like an interjection of some external wisdom, you know. Now some people say the external was the East and the influences through the Silk Road and all that kind of stuff. But Christianity came at a great point just when it was needed most, because a lot of the ways that Rome was a colder, harsher place. And I think the world had an injection of warmth and compassion from the existence of Christianity. And that's one of the most powerful things I think about it.
Brian, and then Paul.
So I guess I would say that if I found an argument even a little convincing, I would.
So much hedging.
But let me say this. If there's something compelling about the theology around the Christmas narrative, it's that there comes a time when doing the right thing is going against everything we know, to the point where even Jesus and his followers were against him. I guess this isn't Christmas, but...
It has to about Christianity or Christmas. Okay. That's fine.
And so in that, if you truly are doing something right and something bold, you will have everyone turn against you, even the people that love you. They will say you're nuts and insane, and if you really want to find out what that's like, follow Jesus to the letter.
Preach.
I mean, to be fair, that also happens when you're a person too. A lot of people hate you.
Truer words.
We could.
Paul, bring us up.
All right, no.
You
Well,
got 20 seconds.
we should have ended on him.
Right in your mouth.
Right. Yeah, just nihilism. The idea that nothing's
What is nihilism?
the idea that nothing's meaningful. The idea that stuff's chaotic without meaning. That's pretty depressing. Plagues me basically hourly. So that's. You asked for the biggest art.
Yeah.
It's the opposite from them, right? And so I'm giving. Yeah, this is it. That's it. Like that. The idea that just it's like nothing's meaningful, and it is actually just all one chaotic, big middle finger to just life.
So on that cheerful note,